Hello everyone, welcome to the channel IGNOU DNHE online classes. Myself Dr. Aayushi. We are studying DNHE 1. Till now, we have studied 5 units from the study material. Now, let's begin with the next unit, that is Unit 6, Planning Balanced Diets. This is last unit of Block 2. What we will study today? Topics are Introduction, Concept of a Balanced Diet, Planning Balanced Diet, Use of Food Groups in Planning Balanced Diets, Use of Recommended Dietary Allowances in Planning Balanced Diets, Guidelines for Planning Balanced Diets, and then at last we will see questions from this unit. Introduction. In the previous units, we read about the theory part. We studied about food and its functions, various nutrients and its functions. Now, we will study how to apply this earned knowledge, that is, we are moving further to the next step, that is the practical part. Now we know what are nutrients and their functions, but for planning balanced diets, we must also know the following points. Number 1. Our body needs these nutrients in specific amounts. Number 2. How do we ensure that we meet our nutrient needs? Number 3. Is there any easy way by which we can plan diets that supply adequate amounts of all these nutrients? Answer to these questions lie in only one sentence. That is, the key to planning nutritionally adequate or balanced diets lies in the selecting the right foods in the right amounts for each individual. How can we achieve this? The best way of selecting the right kinds of foods for each meal is by using food groups. What are food groups? Each food group includes a specific list of food items which share the same function and contribute similar nutrients. How does planning balanced diet starts? It starts by identifying the food groups, then selecting items from each food group, and at last decide on the amount to be consumed. This will depend on how much of each nutrient is required. Concept of balanced diets. Definition. A balanced diet can be defined as one which contains different types of food in such quantities and proportions that the need for calories, minerals, vitamins and other nutrients is adequately met, and a small provision is made for extra nutrients to withstand short durations of leanness. Let's understand its meaning. First is, a balanced diet consists of different types of food items. A balanced diet includes a variety of food, but the major aim is to ensure that all nutrients are supplied by the diet. And this can be achieved by first classifying food into groups. Second is, a balanced diet meets the nutrient needs. A balanced diet meets nutrient needs because of the amounts and proportions of the food selected, and this would be based on the recommended dietary intakes laid down for the individual for whom the diet is planned. Whenever a balanced diet is prepared for an individual, make sure that it includes items from each food group, because variety in food satisfies the taste and provides all the nutrients. Second point is that the diet must supply all the necessary nutrients, and this is achieved by selecting correct amounts and proportions of food which will be finally based on RDAs of that individual. Third part is, balanced diet provide for periods of leanness. Whenever a balanced diet is prepared, it provides for the periods of leanness. You might be thinking, what is it? Period of leanness means that period when we may not consume foods in the amount we require. So this implies that there is a safety margin or little extra for those times when we do not meet nutrient needs adequately. For example, during a trip you did not find any restaurant for the dinner time, so you adjust this meal with snacks. Or when you are fasting, your body do not get any food, but still it functions. This is because balanced diet provide for periods of leanness. Actually, we do need to make any special adjustment because RDAs already include a margin of safety. So, planning diets on the basis of RDAs should take care of this aspect as well. Now, let's move to the next topic, planning balanced diets. I hope you would have understood the concept of balanced diet well. Planning balanced diet depends on physiological factors such as age and sex, and two other basics are selection of right kind of foods and inclusion of suitable amounts of these foods so as to meet the nutrient needs. Let's summarize what we have studied so far. Listen carefully and you may even note it down. Number 1. To make our body and mind function efficiently, we need to have a balanced diet. Number 2. Balanced diet consists of variety of foods and provide all nutrients. Number 3. Balanced diet is planned according to age and sex of an individual, which provides all the nutrients and also provides for the period of leanness. Number 4. While planning a balanced diet, right kind of foods and their suitable amounts are selected. Now let's see how food and their amounts are selected. Use of food groups in planning balanced diets. What is a food group? A food group consists of a number of food items sharing common characteristics. We can classify foods on two bases. Number 1, on their sources, and number 2, on their physiological functions. Classification based on source. This classification is easy to understand. Its categories are cereals and millets, pulses, nuts and oils, green leafy vegetables, root vegetables, other vegetables, fruits, milk and milk products, sugar and jaggery, fats and oils, flesh foods, eggs and condiments and spices. We can very easily classify food in these categories. Second classification of food is based on functions. We had learnt functions of food in Unit 1. There are 3 physiological functions of food, that is, energy giving, body building, and protective or regulatory functions. Food performs these functions because it contains specific nutrients. Let's revise these functions again. Carbohydrates and fats provide energy and perform energy giving function. Proteins aid in body building and repair of worn out tissues, that is, they perform body building function. Vitamins and minerals contribute to preventing diseases, that is, they perform protective function. Water, fibers, vitamins and minerals play a role in regulating body functions, that is, they perform regulatory function. Therefore, food can be classified into 3 categories based on functions. They are Group 1, energy giving foods, Group 2, body building foods, Group 3, protective or regulatory foods. We will discuss these 3 individually. So, energy giving category. It includes 3 types of foods. Number 1, carbohydrate rich food A, which includes cereals, roots and tubers. Number 2, carbohydrate rich foods B. It includes sugar and jaggery. Number 3, fat rich foods, which includes fats and oils. The primary nutrients provided by these foods are carbohydrates and fats. If we take cereals for example, it provides carbohydrates, but in addition to it, it also provides some amount of proteins, vitamins and minerals also. Similarly, fats and oils provide fat-soluble vitamins in addition to fat. Second is body building group. It includes foods rich in proteins. This group includes milk and milk products, meat and meat products, fish, eggs, pulses, and nuts and oil seeds. The primary nutrient provided by all these foods is protein, but these foods provide several other nutrients as well. For example, nuts and oil seeds. These are excellent sources of fat in addition to protein. Third is food group, which is protective or regulatory group. The primary nutrients provided by foods in this group are vitamins and minerals. Examples are fruits and vegetables. These are rich sources of all vitamins and minerals. Summary of classification. First classification based on sources is difficult to use in day-to-day life for planning diets because there are so many groups. Second classification based on function is simple and is useful in planning meals or diets and is most commonly used classification. After knowing the importance of all these three food groups, that is energy giving, bodybuilding and protective or regulatory groups, one must ensure that each and every meal should include all these three food groups. So, by doing this, the diet would supply all essential nutrients and would become balanced. So, we had previously discussed that planning balanced diets includes right kind of food selection and second, right amount of food selection. So, in the classification of food groups, we studied about right kind of food selection, and for the second point, that is right amount and proportion of food selection, we will study use of recommended dietary allowances and planning balanced diets. Definition of RDA. RDA is the average daily dietary nutrient intake level sufficient to meet the nutrient requirement of nearly all healthy individuals in a particular life stage and gender groups. Recommended dietary intakes are based on requirements. Every individual has different nutrient requirement during a particular life stage and according to gender. Therefore, RDI depends on requirements. What is nutrient requirement? The requirement for a particular nutrient is the minimum amount that needs to be consumed to prevent symptoms of deficiency and to maintain satisfactory levels of the nutrient in the body. It depends on age, body weight, and physiological state of the individual. RDI can be very well understood by this picture. RDI is sum of requirement and safety margin. Requirement is the nutrient requirement whose definition we saw right now. That is, it is the minimum amount which should be consumed to prevent symptoms of deficiency and maintain satisfactory levels of the nutrient. And safety margin. It means that extra amount of nutrient which is added to cover factors like variation in requirement for individual to individual, periods of low intake or periods of leanness, nature of diet, and cooking losses. Let's see some examples for understanding this concept. One experiment was conducted on adults and found that intake of 20 mg per day of vitamin C helped in preventing deficiency of vitamin C or scurvy, and thus a satisfactory level of vitamin C could be maintained in the body. But it is seen that while cooking, vitamin C is easily destroyed. On the average, 50% cooking losses was considered reasonable. So, the recommended intake was therefore fixed to the double the requirement, that is 40 mg per day. If we see the values in this case, here RDI is 40 mg per day, requirement is 20 mg per day, and safety margin is 20 mg per day. That is, the sum total of requirement and safety margin is 40 mg per day, which will be the RDI, that is recommended dietary intake. Let's see other examples. Take protein for example. Animal protein is of better quality than plant proteins. Since vegetable protein is utilized to a relatively lower extent, so more protein needs to be consumed and therefore RDAs also increases. Similarly, in the case of iron, The availability of iron to the body depends on the type of food consumed. Absorption of iron from typical Indian diets is low. Therefore, more iron needs to be consumed to meet the requirement. That is, the RDA is fixed at a higher level. 3 important points for RDA. First is, RDA are set high enough to meet the needs of almost all healthy people. Second, RDAs do not apply to people who are suffering from a disease which influences the nutrient needs, because a disease can cause an increase or decrease in the requirement of one or more specific nutrients. Sometimes, medicines prescribed during illness influence nutrient need. For example, when one takes antibiotics, one has to consume more of B complex vitamins. So, the RDAs only apply to healthy individuals because diseases are likely to influence nutrient requirement. Third is, recommended dietary intakes for adults are based on sex, age, body size and activity level. In adults, the RDA of energy and protein varies depending on age, sex, body weight and activity level. So, on this basis, RDAs are fixed using a principle of reference individual. Reference men is an Indian man in age group of 18 to 29 years doing moderate work and weighing 60 kgs. Here, age is between 18 to 29 years, sex is male, body weight is 60 kg and activity level is moderate work. So, taking these values, RDAs are fixed. You can see the chart of RDA for Indians by ICMR in the book. Same is with reference women. Age between 18 to 29 years, sex female, body weight is 55 kgs and activity level is moderate work. RDAs are decided on these values as the characteristic values changes. There will be a need to make change in the RDAs also. That is, adjustments can be made in the case of RDAs for individuals who deviate from the standard references. Some salient features of recommended dietary allowances. RDAs are expressed in kilocalories, grams, milligrams and micrograms. RDAs for energy for adult men and women are based on activity level. Activity level are classified into 3 categories: sedentary, that is light work, moderate and heavy. And more the activity level, the higher would be the RDAs for energy. RDAs for thiamine, riboflavin and niacin are dependent on RDAs for energy. These 3 vitamins play a vital role in the release of energy from carbohydrates, fats and proteins. RDAs for protein are based on body weight. For an adult, 1 gram protein per kg body weight is fixed and it varies for other age categories. RDAs for energy and protein are given as additional intakes in pregnancy and lactation. These are periods of physiological stress. Therefore, RDAs are given in terms of additional intakes and is indicated by a plus sign. You can see this in the RDA chart in book. In infancy, RDAs for energy, protein, iron, thiamine, riboflavin and niacin is expressed per kg body weight. RDAs for vitamin A have been given in terms of retinol or alternatively in terms of beta carotene. We have studied earlier that only 25% of consumed beta carotene is converted to retinol. That is, it is 4:1 ratio. But ICMR expert group recommended a conversion ratio of 8:1. Therefore, RDAs are different for both retinol and beta carotene. The amounts of different foods to be consumed would depend on the RDAs. We can relate by an example. The higher the RDA for a particular nutrient, the more should be the consumption of foods rich in that nutrient. Let's see another example. The amount of cereal consumed by a heavy worker should be more than that consumed by a light worker. This is because heavy worker need more energy, and cereals are a rich source of carbohydrates which are energy giving food. Therefore, RDA for energy will be more. Guidelines for planning balanced diets. Diets are planned on the basis of age, sex, body weight and activity levels. But there are some more important aspects of planning balanced diets. Balanced diets are individual specific, region specific and income specific. Let's learn about them. Individual specific. Balanced diets cannot be generalized for all. They are individual specific. We can understand them more easily by taking examples. Firstly, it is specific for age and sex. And in case of adults, it also is specific with the activity level. A balanced diet for a sedentary worker would be different from that of a heavy worker. And yes, of course, a balanced diet for an infant would be very different from that of an adult. And a diet for an adolescent girl would be different compared to one for an adolescent boy. Next is region specific. Balanced diets are always region specific. While planning diet for an individual, always plan according to his region, because particular foods are available in a region and can be used in planning, and using other foodstuffs will be impractical and unsuitable. Let's take some examples. Wheat is a popular and common cereal in North India and cannot include ragi in their diet because it is grown only in South. Apart from this, a balanced diet for a particular region must reflect the characteristic meal patterns, social and religious practices of that region. These factors are taken into consideration to ensure that the diet plan is acceptable and practical. Last one is income specific, another important factor. Balanced diet for an individual vary depending on income. A balanced diet would imply the use of all food groups in each and every meal. The selection of foods and amounts in which they are consumed would vary depending on his or her income. Let's take some examples. As income increases, consumption of cereals reduces, and consumption of milk, animal protein foods, vegetables, fruits, fats and sugar tend to increase. So while planning meals, it should be kept in mind that excessive amounts of fat and sugar are not to be included in diet, so as to maintain good health, avoid putting on weight and developing other health problems. So, the judicious selection of food is important for both rich and poor. The ultimate aim is always to meet the nutritional requirements. Steps in planning balanced diets. There are 7 steps for planning balanced diets. These are: identify the individual and his or her specific characteristics. Consult RDAs for energy and proteins. Decide on the amounts of the food groups. Decide on number of meals to be consumed. Distribute total amounts decided between meals. Decide on items and their amounts within each group for each meal. Decide on menu. Check day's diet for inclusion of specific food groups in the amount decided. Let's discuss them in detail. First of all, identify the individual. See his age, sex, activity level and income, socio-economic background, religion, region. These all would determine the type of diet to be planned. Next is consult RDAs for energy and proteins. Generally, it is observed that the diet which meet energy and protein needs will also meet the needs of other nutrients as well, if care is taken to include rich sources of vitamin and minerals. Next step is deciding on total amount of specific groups. There are various foodstuffs available to meet our nutrient needs like cereals, fats, sugar, milk, meat, fish, poultry, eggs, pulses, vegetables and fruits. But in how much amount? This will be decided based on income. The amount included would be such that the RDA can be met for energy and protein. After this comes decide on number of meals to be consumed. Meal frequency varies depending on income, work and school schedule, and also according to the convenience. And it is observed that people belonging to higher income group consume more meals. Let's have a look at list of meals consumed in a day. There are 4 groups. Group A. It consists of breakfast, lunch and dinner, and this is typical of low income group. They can afford only these meals. Group B and C. Breakfast, lunch, tea and dinner in Group B. Breakfast, mid-morning meal, lunch, tea and dinner in Group C. These both are common in middle income group. Group D. It includes bed tea, breakfast, mid-morning meal, lunch, mid-afternoon meal, tea, dinner and bedtime. This is common in high income group. Changes in number of meals can be done according to age. Like a child may not be able to consume much at a time, so he needs to consume more meals. Work and school schedule are also important to decide on number of meals and amount. Next step is distribute total amounts decided between meals. Till now we have decided upon food groups and total amount. Now it's time to distribute these over day's meal. Next step is decide on items and their amounts within each group for each meal. In this step, we have to decide which dish can be prepared for each meal on our previously decided food items and their amounts. Last step is check day's diet for inclusion of specific food groups in the amounts decided. After deciding the menu and listing the amounts of each ingredient used in preparation of dishes, now it's time to check that we have included each item in correct amount that we decided in step 3 according to the distribution. If all these steps are followed, then we can prepare a balanced diet. Let's revise these steps once again in short. Step 1. Identify the individual's characteristics and background. Step 2. Consult RDAs for energy and proteins according to individual for meeting nutrient needs. Step 3. Decide total amount of specific groups including 3 food groups. Step 4. Decide on number of meals to be consumed. Step 5. Then distribute total amount of food between meals. Step 6. After deciding food items and their amounts, now decide which dish can be prepared by using these ingredients. Step 7. It's time to check that the food items and their amounts we decided are correctly distributed among different meals. I hope you would have understood planning of balanced diets. You can use a chart of RDA given in this unit, and also you can go through an extra second given at end of section 2 and practical manual of DNHE 1. These 2 charts will be very useful in planning a balanced diet. Now let's see questions from this unit. What is balanced diet? In this question, you have to write its definition and write in brief about it. Next is what is RDA. Always remember the acronyms of all the terms because sometimes only short forms are mentioned in question. Write down guidelines for planning balanced diets. Here you have to write all factors in brief and also steps in planning balanced diets in brief. What are steps in planning balanced diets? Write all 7 steps in detail. And I have been repeatedly saying to you to go through check your progress exercises questions because they are very important from exam point of view. So we have completed unit 6 and also block 2 along with this. In next video we will start with block 3, unit 7, principles of meal planning and meal planning for the adult.